For years, I used to teach Aikido believing that it would be effective for self-defense. Eventually, I tested my Aikido and became disillusioned by it. But before that happened, I used to run the third most popular Aikido channel in the world, filled with my Aikido tutorials. Among them were some Aikido tutorials where I thought I'm teaching good self-defense. Essentially though, I was just a guy convinced by his instructors that the martial art I was taught works for self-defense and that I was teaching the right stuff. Now it's been years since I practiced, taught Aikido, or even looked at my old Aikido videos. And even the thought of watching a video where I explain that Aikido works for self-defense feels embarrassing to me. But then there are hundreds of other martial artists who are just like I used to be, still believing that what they were taught and even what they are teaching would work for self-defense. So I decided that it's finally time for me to take a look again at an old Aikido self-defense video that I filmed and to examine it, so that other people who are in a position just like I was, including people who even aren't aware that they are, could take a look at it and realize that maybe what they're teaching isn't that great either. After all, teaching self-defense is a huge responsibility. If someone will get into a self-defense situation, it can be a matter of life or death. And their self-defense skills and knowledge may be the main defining factor in whether they will survive. As a result, if a martial arts instructor teaches their students bad self-defense, it may lead to dire consequences. That is why both as students and instructors, we must take a look at what we're teaching for self-defense and question it as much as we can. And that's exactly what we're going to do with my old video. Getting ready to look at it, I didn't remember much of what I taught in it. So I was curious to see if maybe some of the stuff I taught wasn't that terrible, and some of it maybe even useful. Up to this moment, I'm still not sure though. So let's find out.
Oftentimes, Aikido has a hard time because by many martial artists, it's considered to be ineffective. And I can definitely see why there's that point.
So as you see, already at the time of filming this video, I was fairly aware that Aikido techniques don't work so well for self-defense. But I still believe that Aikido can be effective for self-defense by using a certain approach that my instructor taught me. And in this video, I'm specifically introducing that approach. Essentially though, without even knowing it, I'm using it as an excuse to still convince myself that Aikido can work for self-defense, even when I have doubts about it.
When you do self-defensive Aikido, now notice it will change, but as long as we maintain the perspective, the mentality of Aikido, it will definitely work.
So here I'm essentially leading the idea that Aikido techniques are just tools and a certain set of principles that once you learn and adapt to that specific approach that I will introduce in a moment, and if you use freely those principles, that then your Aikido will work.
So I do a technique, I receive here, I strike, I lead the person out. Some people could say, okay, nobody's gonna attack you in this way.
So that's a common critique that Aikido gets, that it has a lot of unrealistic attacks. And personally now, I think that is true. But back then I had this justification to justify it.
One thing which helps is to realize that it's a line of an attack. It's not about the specific attack itself. So for example, if he uses a knife.
And this is the terrible part where I bring in the wooden knife, which I think is a huge disservice to students of Aikido, because they start to believe that they can actually deal against the knife, but what you're about to see is not a good approach of dealing against the knife.
It makes more sense. And here now, to do the same technique, it makes more sense.
So an attack with a knife like this, okay, it may be possible, somebody may do it, but the reality is that most likely people will not stop. If you look at knife defense videos online, usually people are just stabbing again and again, they're changing directions, it's hectic, it's chaotic, but yet again, trained with a single slash and then no resistance whatsoever, it may lead to false confidence in an Aikido student that this may actually work.
When I look at techniques, I see them as a set of principles, but I'm not expecting to get that specific technique on a street scenario.
So now this idea, okay, it kind of makes sense again, because you may discover certain principles in Aikido which do work, but the thing is the training methodology is what's really missing here. No matter how sound some of the principles may be, such as stepping out of the attack line, etc., if you're not adding resistance, if you're not adding spontaneous pressure, these principles would just not become part of your process if somebody really attacks you.
On the street, nobody's gonna wait for you to grab the hand. As we start to look at how a self-defensive Aikido would look, it's gonna become much more tight.
So again, my direction kind of makes sense. What I'm saying is reasonable. There is an understanding in what I'm teaching that nobody's gonna stick their arm out and stay there, which I guess is self-evident, but you know, that's how we used to train it in Aikido. But then I still thought I know the right way to train, and I'm not so sure if that approach did make so much sense. So let's check it out.
If I go in a self-defensive mode, I go straight for him.
Again, kind of makes sense, but I'm not sure this is going on to go on the right direction. So again, let's continue to watch.
He does a Yoko Minuchi. I really go inside as quickly as I can. I don't want to play and I do whatever is necessary. Again, the concept is not that bad. I mean, the going directly in and blocking the arm, that could actually be a legit approach. But the problem though is that my partner here falls over just like that, you know, the traditional Aikido way where there's no resistance whatsoever. And while the approach may have some reason to it, the training methodology is still flawed because my partner just gave the technique up for me. And obviously no real attacker would do that. But let's continue to watch and see if there's maybe something still coming up better. Really go into an irimi and really gonna try to end this quick. So meaning, okay, if we do one more, so if he attacks, I go in and I really want to go down. I really want to not give him any space to move at all. So again, it kind of makes sense, you know, to knock out the attacker as quick as possible. That's a legit self-defense principle. But then it seems with this approach, I'm completely relying on that I'm just gonna win by first move and that I'm not actually working with follow-up attacks. So he goes in, I go in here. I don't waste time. And from here, even if he would go into attacking again, so he wants to jump up, do something, grab me, again, we start to continue in this fashion as well. So here, surprisingly, there is a follow-up. There's a tiny bit of resistance, there's a tiny bit of spontaneity, but the truth is, it's just way not enough. Whatever I'm doing here does work against a partner who's kind of resisting, but just a tiny bit. But if he would be really using his full-on strength, then none of the follow-up stuff I do would work. Unless this is trained with resistance, unless this is trained with a fully uncooperative partner who's just really going for you, or just being unpredictable and not giving up as soon as the first throw. Unless you're training with such a partner, if a real attacker will try to hunt you down, whatever I did here is just not gonna click in, it's not gonna work. Those are simply two different distinct skills to be able to perform it against a partner who's not resisting and one who does. So I will admit this was actually not as embarrassing and terrible as I thought. But again, the thing is, while conceptually some of the things did make sense, the training methodology was what was really lacking. And I think that's where the real big issue is. Conceptually, a lot of traditional martial arts do make sense, like the intercepting fist or one punch kill. There are a lot of different ideas that traditional martial arts have. And intellectually, since they make sense, that's why we start to believe, okay, this makes sense. It means it works. Also, a person who you admire and who's officially black belt tells you that, and that makes it even much more believable. But the real issue here is that these principles are never really tested. These concepts are never really tested and pressure tested. Over more than 15 years of my Aikido practice, I never put this up to test where I asked my partner to resist way more, to resist 60%, 70, 80, 90, 100. And it's not like it wasn't possible. What I was doing was not too dangerous for the ring. But that's where another big problem is. It's having complete blind faith in your instructor and the system they're teaching. And since they trust it, you eventually even end up teaching it yourself. And you don't even stop to think, damn, I actually haven't tested this. How do I really know that this works? You end up being satisfied by the intellectual value of it, and that's where I think the downfall happens. I really hope that this video will make some martial artists out there think, to question their martial art, and to put to the test the concepts that they had about their martial art. Because as I said, it's a huge responsibility to be claiming to teach self-defense. Now, if you want to see how my Aikido improved through pressure testing it, click this video right here where I use my Aikido against Judo. And until I'll see you next time, as always, keep owning your journey.